Lilith, a short story. He stopped one of the housemaids. "I'm looking for Mrs. Doole," he said, and without saying a word the maid directed him to the dimly lit steps at the far end of the hall. He had had enough to drink to notice the maid's slender shape and cherry lips. When Mrs. Doole answered the door, he introduced himself. "Walter Swallow," he said, to which he added the label, "Surveyor." Mrs. Doole was an older woman, distinguished by a dark mole, a beauty mark on her left cheek, but also by suspicious and unrelenting dark eyes behind her black-framed glasses. She was dressed in black, like a woman in mourning. She was the woman who, by all accounts, owned the mine in question. Swallow had been discussing the mine in question, a gold mine marked on the only map at his disposal as the Great Western Perenelle, with a drunk man at the bar of the Emerald Star Hotel. In answer to the obstacles Swallow was reciting, the drunk had raised his eyes upwards and told him, "Why don't you ask her? The lady who owns the mine boards upstairs." When upstairs, Swallow broached the subject with Mrs. Doole, explaining that he was contracted by a Mr. Sutherland to survey, as a preliminary measure, contours for a solid road through the pocked ruins of the gold diggings, and he mentioned the Great Western Perenelle. She corrected him. "It is the Lilith," she said. A man named Gamboli, an Italian, had purchased the mine. This was when it was still operating, and she said he had given it the name Lilith. "Lilith, a sweetheart," Swallow surmised. "No, Mr. Swallow, no." His immediate employment, which he tended to misrepresent as surveying, required an assessment of the costs and hazards of gouging out a road, a solid thoroughfare, through the landscape of fevered craters, shafts and mullock heaps, should the Crown set any funds aside for it. He arrived in the worst time of the year, mid-winter, and there was flooding. He boarded at the Emerald Star, and during the dark evenings there was only drinking and whoring to nurse him from his other woes. In Sydney he had seen a fortune-teller. She had told him that some destiny would open before him if he took this work. But of course the goldfields are wretched, and after only a few days he understood it to be a dead end for him. If he could raise the money he would go to England. But neither the goldfields nor England might be far enough. He felt crippled by what he had done, and yet his legs kept moving. He kept writing the letter in his thoughts. He never put it to paper. "Dear Felicity, I can never explain. You will never forgive me, nor should you." The whiskey was bad, perhaps the worst he had ever tasted. He managed 5 shillings from the engagement ring. When he told men he was there to survey a road, they laughed and assumed he was involved in some aspect of smuggling. The whores thought that too. "Sure, Mr. Swallow," they said, cackling. "You're making a road." There would be no road without drains, and the whole region was flooding, mine shafts filling with rancid brown water, camps moving to higher ground. When the sun came out, the mosquitoes would swarm. It was while he was waiting those few days for the rain to clear and the mudslides and pits to subside in the area of his concern that he heard and became unusually curious about a story regarding one of the mines that, as it happened, was problematic to any proposed roadway. This shaft was the Great Western Perenelle. It was deep and precarious. According to the story, a popular account confirmed by numerous reports he heard, it had been dug by a one-armed man, a German. He named it the Perenelle. All the shafts were named after sweethearts. The Central Deborah, Hazel's Lead, the Red Celeste, the Lucky Jane, the First Marlene, the Great Western Perenelle. It was also the custom that where one man bought or perhaps acquired in a card game the mine and diggings of another man, he could rename it after some darling of his own. But a mine dug by a one-armed man attracts in itself superstitious remnants, because already the Paddies and perhaps the Chinese started whispers that such a miner must be commanding supernatural assistance. A man with only one arm can't dig a gold mine by himself. It defies nature. The German must have been some sorcerer, some Solomon, commanding imps and gnomes and devils to do his work. This sort of story quickly prospers where men are working themselves to death in search of just a few nuggets of good fortune. And apparently a preacher, an American, had declared the mine cursed and said that Christian men should never work it. Miners entertain more superstitions than sailors, and mines, like ships, are ladies, and all of them are equally hazardous. When they're caught in the winter and huddled in their tents, miners talk around such nonsense. Mrs. Doole knew more. The mine, she had said, changed hands. It was purchased by an Italian, Mr. Gamboli. Geologically, the mine shaft hit a rich vein. The stone was hard, but there was gold to be had. The curse soon fell though. Gamboli bought the mine sight unseen, and then took a steamer 5 months at sea to Port Phillip, then a carriage to the goldfields. He was inspecting his investment for the very first time when a side wall collapsed and he was crushed to death. But not before, said Mrs. Doole. He changed the name. Then she explained that the mine was closed after that. Whether it was because it had been dug by a one-armed man or because of underground seepage, it was deemed unstable, and miners set out to approach that rich vein in the hard stone from other angles. How did Mrs. Doole come to own it? She didn't explain directly. Does a woman purchase an abandoned and ill-fated gold mine? When she related the fate of the mine, she again seemed like a woman in mourning. Are you a religious man? She asked Swallow. In my own modest way, Mrs. Doole, he assured her. It was not his business to make offers, but should this mine, a defunct mine, be unfortunately positioned, Mrs. Doole would be asked to sell her allotment. It would be sealed and filled forever to make way for the road, which would be a tidy outcome. Was she a religious woman? Perhaps not. She was a studious woman, surrounded by books and by Hindu oddments. Was perhaps one of those theosophists. There were many theosophists in Sydney, most of them, as far as Mr. Swallow could tell, older women. In any case, he was at first cautious, lest she was a religious woman and might want to impose her own confession upon him, or invite him to repent. He thought as much when she took a book from a shelf, but he was happy to find it was not a Bible. Rather, it was a book of verse. But first, she tested how much he had gleaned from local gossip. You have heard that it was dug by a one-armed man, that story? She asked him. So they say, Swallow said. And he suggested, as per local gossip, that it was why its walls were unstable and why it was not a viable operation. The woman in black owned a white elephant, a useless pit too dangerous to ever work again. And they say, Mrs. Doole continued, that this one-armed man had some supranatural assistance. You've heard that? I've also heard that, said Swallow, making light of it. But the Chinese will tell you that they conjure the assistance of dragons down their mines. Either supernatural assistance, she said, or a perverse fervour. Mrs. Doole had ordered tea. Swallow and her company was concerned that he reeked of bad whisky. One other evening he had taken the paid acquaintance of an English girl named Shirley. "I've never been to England," he said to her. "What's it like?" "It never stops raining," she said. He was sitting down, removing his shoes, and looked out the window. The tea arrived, the same housemaid, and the older woman was forthright. "I'm not prepared to sell the mine," she said directly. "I'm not in the position to make you an offer," he assured her. "I'm merely here to view the site, survey it, and establish the best route, the best possible route, you understand, for the thoroughfare. It would be very premature of me, Mrs. Doole, to even suggest the acquisition of your property." He then said he was sure she agreed on the dire need for defined thoroughfares and effective drainage. She knew this to be cant. Dropping her glasses, she addressed him with her dark eyes. "It was purchased by an Italian gentleman, Mr. Gamboli," she said again. "Yes, you said Swallow. And he had heard all that much. "The story they tell me is that it's cursed. He died in the mine, did he not?" There was a long silence as Mrs. Doole, easing her gaze, blew the steam from her teacup. Eventually she said, "I knew Mr. Gamboli." Then she opened the book of verse in her lap and read out, "This is of Lilith, by her Hebrew name, Lady of Night." "Lilith," Swallow acknowledged. She read it again. "This is of Lilith, by her Hebrew name, Lady of Night." "And Mr. Gamboli renamed the mine, the Lilith, yes?" he said. At this the woman smiled to herself. "The goldfields are full of drunkards and gamblers, opium bibbers and loose women and murderers. Murderers, Mr. Swallow. A man can have his throat cut for a nugget of gold. You cannot imagine what gold brings to the souls of men, what chthonic things they rip from the earth in their greed, what terrible latencies they disturb. But," she went on, "there are also wowsers, revivalist preachers from America, Adventists, Mormons, ladies of the Temperance League, all seething in one miasma of greed and opportunity." She was apparently a settled resident of the Emerald Star Hotel. Her room overlooked the one and only civil thoroughfare in the district. Swallow guessed that she rarely left her room. There was a silver statuette of a dancing Hindu goddess and similar paraphernalia. It reminded him of the fortune teller in Sydney. Artefacts and fabrics, ornamentations were coming in from British India. She looked down and read a further portion of the verse. "This is of Lilith, by her Hebrew name, Lady of Night. She, in the delicate frame that was of woman after, did unite herself with Adam in unblessed delight, who, uncapacious of that dreadful love, begat on her not majesty as Jove, but the worm brood of terrors unconfessed, that chose henceforth as their avoided nest the mire-fed writhen thicket of the mind." Mr. Swallow listened politely. The question to be asked was why this Italian from far away had named his gold mine the Lilith. But first the older woman wanted to put the young surveyor in his place. "You smell of liquor, Mr. Swallow," she informed him. And then she looked at his hands. "And I see from the faded band on your finger but until recently you were wearing a ring. This permitted Swallow to be less polite. It removed the easy indifference from his face. She had noticed the way he had looked at the maid when she brought the tea. "Explain the poem to me," he said, with no nonsense in his voice. She was certainly going to be a problem, this woman with the beauty spot on her left cheek, when the time came for road making. He thought it to his advantage to encounter her. As a surveyor, she was a contour in the landscape. "Lilith is the Hebrew name for her," she said, "for the Lady of Night." "So I gather," said Swallow. He was less friendly now. "But she's not some sweetheart of that name of Mr. Gamboli, Lily to her friends," he jested. "No," she said. At this point she said, "I have the titles to the mine. They are with my solicitors in Port Phillip." "Unless it can be worked," said Swallow, "the mine is worthless to you." She ignored this and instead explained that the Lady of Night is known by many names. And, thought he, there are many so-called ladies of the night who go by many names, and the goldfields are awash with them. A figure of mythology then, he now gathered. She agreed with that. She was very probably a theosophist, he was thinking. Mr. Gamboli, she then explained, was an aristocrat, a wealthy man, but he had been strangely drawn to the far side of the world. "If you don't mind me asking, Mrs. Dool," said Swallow, "may I inquire what your first name is?" She ignored this and read the full verse again. "This is of Lilith by her Hebrew name, Lady of Night, she in the delicate frame," and so on. And then she carefully unpicked its argument. "This is of Lilith, Lady of Night, she that did unite herself with Adam, who begat on her not majesty, but terrors that chose as their nest the mind." Mining at the best of times is a matter of good fortune. Men name mines after their sweethearts as a password for luck. "You knew Mr. Gamboli," he said. "Very well," she assured him. Then she laughed. "You can imagine, Mr. Swallow, the consternation among the good Christian folk when a man names a mine the Lilith." "I'm not entirely unfamiliar with the scriptures, Mrs. Dool," he said, "but I don't recall this story." "Oh, it's not biblical," she said. "Lilith is the dark bride of Adam." "Why would a man name a mine a Lilith?" he asked her outright. He had, in the rain, not long after first arriving, trudged across to the mine in question to see it, survey it with his eyes. It was, sure enough, a gaping hole in the earth. The whole valley and the hillside was full of such holes dug by desperate men. A gold rush draws the dregs of men from every quarter, even a one-armed man from Germany. Once the hard work is done and the flush of the rush subsides, wealthy men, aristocrats from Italy it seems, purchase the lucrative ones. The Great Western Perenelle, the Lilith, was nothing but a deep black pit, empty and abandoned. He had stood at its lip, or a few feet back, and looked in. "I sailed out here with Mr. Gamboli," said Mrs. Dool. "Ambrose. His name was Ambrose. I met him in Florence. The journey took 5 months. We had 5 months together." She fell into a recollection and then looked at Swallow once more with her dark, direct eyes. "We were not married," she said. "No," he said, quite sure that was the case. "Would you like to hear more of the poem?" she asked. "By all means," he said, sitting back and sipping his tea. "She is the night, all horror is of her, heaped, shapeless, on the unclaimed, chaotic marsh, or huddled on the looming sepulchre where the incult and scanty herb is harsh. She is the night, all terror is of her, when the distempered dark begins to boil with wavering face of love and oily blur of pallor on her suffocating coil. Or she can be all pale, under no moon or star, with veiling of the glamour cloud, all pale as were the fainting secret soon to be exhaled, bride-robed in a clinging shroud. For she is night, and knows each wooing mood, and her warm breasts are near in the charmed air of summer eve. The wooing night, all nuptials are of her, and she the shame of brides, veiling the white of bosoms that for sharp fulfilment yearn. She is the obscure centre of delight, and steals the kiss. All mystery and all love, beyond our ken, she woos us, mournful till we find her fair, and gods and stars, and songs and souls of men are the sparse jewels in her scattered hair. "Look down into the darkness, Mr. Swallow," she said to him. "A man might have many reasons to name a mine the Lilith."